Merry Christmas. Well, not to Steeler fans. The Pittsburgh Steelers conclude Christmas weekend with a beatdown loss to the team wearing Santa red in the Kansas City Chiefs as the Chiefs pick up a 36-10 victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And once again, the Steelers not really in it at all from Jump Street, despite Travis Kelce missing this game in COVID protocols. It didn't matter for the Chiefs. They get a big victory and right now in the driver's seat for that number one seed. They are in the playoffs. They are a division champion. The Pittsburgh Steelers, on the complete flip side, are still somehow fighting for their playoff lives. But really, how alive are they after that loss? 36-10 again, the loss to Kansas City. This is your Steelers post-game show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now. I'm Mike Asti, and I am joined by our Nick Farabaugh. And Nick, the number one question I got to ask you, they are mathematically still in it, but after watching what we just watched, and it just went bad all the way around, a really bad loss to the Chiefs. Maybe some thought they would lose this game. I thought they'd lose this game, but not like this. Another bad loss. This one to a really good team, but still one that's going to be in Steeler fans' mouth for a while here. And mathematically, the Steelers are still alive. They have that Monday Night Football game against Cleveland coming up. They then will close off the year against another divisional foe, against the Ravens. We've seen teams the Steelers need to lose actually lose this weekend as well. So it's not done for Pittsburgh, but are the Steelers done for you? Does this kind of bury them in terms of a legitimacy of this season, of really deserving a playoff berth and having a chance once they're in, even though they're not mathematically out of it? Does this bury them for you?
Well, they can make the playoffs. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. But I mean, they're certainly not a good team. I don't think anyone thinks that they're a good team. The team is just not talented. I mean, it's not well coached. They're not super talented. They obviously have some really solid players, but it's not. This is one of the weaker teams I think we've seen in Pittsburgh over the last 2 decades. Since Ben Roethlisberger came, this might be Ben Roethlisberger's least talented roster in his entire career. There's a good argument it is. This is a really bad roster on both sides of the ball, and they're also shorthanded too, especially defensively. They were missing a lot of guys today, between COVID protocols, between just season-ending injuries on the defensive line. They were missing a lot of guys, and so this team, it's not a good team. Again, they can make the playoffs. They're not going to make much noise if they do make it, but yeah, I mean, it is kind of what it is. We've seen the Steelers exposed enough against teams like the Bengals, the Raiders. Obviously, this game to know that the Steelers are at the very best. When they're on, it's never a pretty win either. They drag teams into the mud with them. That's how the Steelers win this year. They make things ugly with the other team. And so that's when they end up winning. But they're not a particularly good team. They win through heart. They win through timely big plays, and they win through their superstars making the splash when they needed to. And really, none of those guys made the splash today.
No, Nick Farabaugh here, Mike Asti, our Steelers post-game show. Steelers lose at 36-10, and really that touchdown garbage time, it was even worse than the score really shows, as they were again out of this from opening kickoff, really, once the Chiefs offense finally got going. So, yeah, they're mathematically still in it. I don't think it would shock anybody if the Steelers would say beat the Browns on Monday Night Football and find themselves calling into a postseason berth. Cleveland also has had their issues and their warts this year. They don't look good at all. That's a game that I don't know if the NFL is thrilled to have on Monday Night Football between those two rivals, even though those are their rivals. They're not good teams right now. But what happened in this game in particular? Because, again, this is a great Chiefs team. This is a Chiefs team that's been on a run the last couple of years, Mahomes, Andy Reid, etc. But this is a Chiefs team that's played worse than they've been playing the last couple of years. They have their issues. They've had to kind of get together, and they talked about this through the broadcast. They've had to kind of change the game plan a little bit this year. Mahomes has not been the MVP that he normally has been this year. Travis Kelce misses this game, I believe, only the second time Mahomes has ever played without Kelce in an NFL game. So a different Chiefs team. They have been winning recently on defense, even when their offense has been struggling. But the offense explodes in this game better than they've been in a long time. And the Steelers couldn't get really anything going on. Nothing could happen for Pittsburgh until maybe late in the game, but at that point it was meaningless. How did Kansas City just manhandle Pittsburgh like this? Because as much as everyone's aware of the Steelers' struggles this year, and most probably predicted Kansas City to win even without Kelsey, maybe, it doesn't appear anybody really expected this bad of a beatdown in such a big game for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, the Chiefs have adjusted to that formula that teams put up on them early in the year, and they've adjusted well. And now they talked about it multiple times on the broadcast too. You can see earlier in the year, it was the big game hunting, if you will, for Patrick Mahomes. He wanted the explosive play, the big play to Hill, the big play to Kelsey, whoever it might be. And now he's kind of understanding to check it down. And that's what you saw a lot today. The Steelers playing a lot of soft cover two. And really, the Chiefs just took that and kind of took it to them, hitting them in the flat, hitting, curls in the middle of the field. Essentially, the Steelers were playing zone all game because, first of all, they can't trust their corners to play man coverage. You're not trusting anyone to go with Hill. And, I mean, to their credit, they did take Tyreek Hill out of this game. He had 2 catches, but everyone else ate as a result of it. And they couldn't stop the run, and that's been a consistent thing with the Steelers. The Steelers always play 6 in the box. The issue is no one can get off their blocks. They miss a lot of tackles. I mean, the Spillane missed tackle, the Spillane Highsmith combo missed tackle on that first touchdown with Edwards-Helaire walking in was, I think perhaps the encapsulation of kind of that run defense all year. I mean, just stuff that has happened. Minkah Fitzpatrick had 13 tackles today. 13 tackles, your free safety. Yeah. It's 27 total tackles in the past 2 weeks for Minkah Fitzpatrick. He had 14 last week against the Titans. That's just terrible, that stat. But that's how they do it on offense. They didn't put a lot of explosive plays. Mahomes was just efficient, took what they gave him. They ran the ball well. And then obviously the Steelers offense, I mean, it was lifeless. And here's the thing: the Steelers offense doesn't threaten you a lot because the Chiefs also sat in too high. The difference is, one, you can get pressure on Ben with just 4 because the offensive line is terrible. 2, the running game is non-existent, and the running game didn't come alive until the Steelers needed to pass the ball at a high level.
Yeah, overall, it ends up being a solid day if you're a fantasy owner of Najee Harris, which, by the way, I am, so I do appreciate that. But it wasn't a great day overall because by the time he stacked these yards, the game was over, and the Chiefs probably were realizing it a little bit too. Go ahead, pad your fantasy number if this game's done. But when they needed it in the beginning of this game, in terms of setting the tone, there was a flea flicker early in this game that I don't know if I've seen a worse one and a worse timing for one ever in my life of watching football, because you try a flea flicker prior to establishing the run. They had not established the run. They haven't established the run in 2 weeks. And all of a sudden you try a flea flicker, and Ben had defender in his face upon hiking the ball. So it just was dead on arrival right away.
It was dead on arrival, and a lot of those were dead on arrival. I mean, Ben's last fumble, Kendrick Green got sat right into his lap right off the play action fake, and then he subsequently got benched. Yeah. So that's a change I think that needed to happen. Green's been terrible this year, but everyone on the line today was terrible. All 5 of them were bad.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a rookie, but yeah.
You're talking about a rookie, but all 5 of these guys were really bad in this game. But, the receivers, I think Deontay Johnson has his ups and downs still. Obviously, the fumble was inexcusable. He just straight up dropped the ball.
Nobody around.
I mean, the utilization, the overexposure of Ray McCloud continues. I mean, it's very inexplicable. Yeah. Ben was bad today, like really bad. Ben was terrible today as well.
They're using Ray like Juju asked for in camp, if you remember that.
Yeah, I mean, he's
Juju's getting to see it.
Blocking for Najee Harris on a screen play on 3rd and 5.
Yeah,
and they lose like 3 yards on it because, of course, it's Ray McCloud lead blocking. Like if you need a receiver to lead block, get Chase Claypool there and make him do it. He's big. He's 6'4", 225.
Did maybe they miss Freiermuth more than just as a pass catcher? Did they actually miss his blocking? Because while he wasn't known for that at Penn State, he's become a solid blocker this year as an overall tight end, could develop in one of the best in the league, I would say, in a couple of years. He certainly might have been heavily missed for this offensive game plan, much more than just 4 or 5 catches in the red zone.
Yeah, well, here's the thing: the Steelers are a bad screen team. They just don't block screens well.
Right.
So that drop off, you can look at their screen efficiency, and it goes straight down when Juju Smith-Schuster went out for the year with a shoulder injury. So it is that, but yes, Freiermuth exacerbates that even more.
Yeah,
and then not playing James Washington, who's a solid blocker himself a lot, also exacerbates that more. So you just got to find the ability to get someone else in the slot other than Ray McCloud. He just doesn't offer much. And again, I think Ben was pretty bad today. I think Ben was early on some routes. The flea flicker, it just sailed on him. He had a few other bad throws where he was lucky it wasn't picked, but the offensive line was bad. Ben was bad today, but he got no help from anyone around him. So I'm not going to, rag on Ben because the offensive line was terrible. His receivers really weren't good. The only receiver that had a good game today was Chase Claypool, out of all people. So
right, which is going to go unnoticed probably. But yeah, it wasn't a bad
Claypool
game.
Had a few really nice catches today, but they never got him involved, which I thought was game planning malpractice. You saw him make 2 great catches. Get the ball to him more. If he's going to do that, at least give him opportunities. They did not give Chase Claypool nearly enough opportunities. The guy had 6 targets and only 3 heading into the fourth quarter. So they barely got Claypool involved at all in this game plan. And Matt Canada also I thought was bad today, but I'm certain we'll talk about him a little bit more. But
we will.
Canada is another issue. So basically everything went wrong. The Chiefs did some things, and it's really not hard to game plan against the Steelers offense. That's all I'll say.
No, the Steelers have certainly been an easy offense to game plan against, and the Steelers defense has certainly had these games where teams can just gash them. And that happened in this one here. The Chiefs win it 36-10 as they continue to be in the driver's seat for their playoff positioning, whereas the Steelers are fighting for their playoff lives, somehow still in there, but are they really done for having a chance to do anything this year? Yeah, I would say so. But that Monday Night Football game against the Browns, another average team, if not worse than average, certainly a winnable game for the Steelers at home, and that would keep them alive. Again, Ben, 23 for 35, 65%, 159, 1 touchdown, and a pick, sack twice. And the weirdest thing, as you mentioned earlier in the top of the show, that they've had these games where they just get destroyed. Then they've also had those games where they win, but they kind of and they talked about this in the broadcast too. They do the manufacturing a win where they're winning, but no one's really impressed by the win. You could go to the Tennessee game, and that's without Derrick Henry and even Julio Jones early in that game. They did that in that game. Ben actually only had about 10 more yards in that game versus this game, a very similar spread that game to this game, but a much different game for the defense that game to this game, and a Chiefs offense that's much more prolific that can stack points. Nick Farabaugh, Mike Asti here on our Steelers post-game show here on Steelers Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live. Head over to Steelers Now for a game recap and all of our coverage here from this Steelers Christmas debacle here. What needs to happen after tonight's debacle? Well, you're taking my word, and we're going to get to that. We're talking about that actually here. Keep watching the post-game show. Keep Watt and Harris, get rid of everybody else. Well, there's going to be some changes, but unfortunately going to be dealing with a few more players than just those two continuing on. And what's the point? I'm trying to win these 2 games. It only makes the draft positioning worse. Well, we'll get there later because I did kind of bring that up to Nick before we started the show, that honestly, the way things are going, there's almost no chance of winning even a playoff game. There's no playoff run that's going to happen here. So it might actually be better to not make the playoffs. Granted, of course, the Rooneys and Tomlin are not going to do that. So they're going to try to win these games with everything going around the league. They may crawl themselves into the postseason. Fix the O-line and the D-line. The same thing every week. Well, that'll segue back, Nick, because we're talking about the offensive struggling, and it's been struggling most of the year. And some of this has not been surprising. Some of this certainly hinges on the offensive line, which we were talking on a draft show last year. Get ready for this. This should be expected. The O-line being young and experienced, we knew it wasn't going to be good this year. But if you had to dish out a piece of the pie here for at least this game in particular, what really went wrong for the offense, and who would you blame more? Is it the offensive line was so bad that they hampered everything else being able to have any success? Was Ben off in this game, even worse than last week? Has he been not good enough to make up for do enough on his own? Are these receivers outside of maybe Deontay, who also had the bad fumble, not stepping up enough? Are they dealing with injuries, which every team in the league are? Harris actually ends up with the yards in this game, unlike last week, but Canada's play calling, which we'll also get to. I mean, that's something that certainly could be mentioned in this game. And I think this game, there were some bad calls that screamed out to you maybe more than even other weeks. What would you say was the Steelers' biggest problem offensively in this game? And then how would you rank it, if you could, between 4 or 5 issues this offense had in this one that all led to 36-10?
One, offensive line, period. That's it. They couldn't block well. Ben was getting hit all the time, so Ben was being rushed. There's nothing you can do schematically to mitigate a bad offensive line. And I think that's what people need to understand. There's nothing you can do when you have an immobile quarterback specifically. You can do it when you have a mobile quarterback because you can do it with all these misdirections. That quarterback can make things happen. You can move the pocket. Ben can't. So when you're in the confines of a Ben Roethlisberger offense, this is the offensive line. 2, it's Ben. Like, Ben did play bad, but you also have to understand why the offense plays like they do is because of him, right? Like, they play this way because of him. So they play with a ton of screens. They get the ball out very quickly. They don't take a ton of deep shots. They largely ignore the middle of the field because of Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah. And less as the weeks go by. They took more deep shots last year in the beginning of this season. It almost seems like there might have been some meeting where they basically said to Ben, we're done. We can't have success with them anymore. But it certainly can handcuff a team when you're saying you're done with deep plays, basically.
Yes. And the offense is how it is because of Ben Roethlisberger and his limitations. You have to play to his strengths in some manner. Right. So they're trying to do that. This game, I don't think, was as much on him as the offensive line because the offensive line destroyed everything. Matt Canada, though, is like, it's like 2A and 2B, and it's Canada and Ben, and you can't separate the two because Canada is calling terrible play sequences. I mean, the 4th and 1 toss, I don't know what in the world possessed him to call a toss to the short side of the field with Chuks Okorafor as the lead blocker. When they have – this is the thing, though. The Chiefs had their strength side to that. They literally crowded that side of the field expecting something like this, and they ran right into it. It was a terrible play call. And the play sequencing is terrible. You did nothing to set up the flea flicker, as you previously said. I mean, there was nothing to set up that flea flicker.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing to set up that flea flicker. There's nothing that you – like on a zero blitz, the Chiefs ran a zero blitz, and you ran a deep crossing route that instead of you're getting man-to-man, they are telling you we are blitzing 8 guys here. Like we are sending it. Everyone else is in man coverage, and you run a deep developing crossing route, like run a quick slant. Like they did it in the touchdown. Like that's what you need to run. Run some crossers, run some drags, run some things that create traffic. Do something different. Like that is the issue here. There's no play sequencing. There's nothing that says this is what we're going to do to attack what they are doing to us. That's the issue here.
It almost
say, Alan actually told me this on Twitter. He wants to see Canada with the good O-line. The issue is
I was going to get there, actually.
Like Canada, absent of just the players, there's no actual play sequencing to set anything up. There's nothing that looks coherent in this offense to actually mitigate their weaknesses. Canada doesn't play to their strengths. He doesn't do any of that. And there's this like magical thing that people talk about. Like, why does Ben all of a sudden in no huddle, and they didn't run any no huddle today either. Whoop-de-doo. But there was why do they become better in no huddle? And Ben's calling plays.
Yeah, go to the Chargers second half. The second half of that Chargers game,
right?
That was the best
the Vikings game.
The Steelers have those 2 games. That's the best Steelers offense in 3 years.
Absolutely. And so people ask, why do they look like that when Ben is calling plays? Because Ben's playing to his strengths.
Right.
Ben knows what he's good at. Ben knows what he's not good at. Why is Canada not doing that? Like, why can Matt Canada not?
They had to have talked.
They set up
at some point.
Like I don't like there. When Ben calls the plays in a no huddle offense,
right? He's
playing to what he knows is right. And I don't want to say like everything Canada does is bad and everything Ben does is good, and because it's not true. Obviously, there's some credit to go to Canada there, but There's a reason why these scripted plays every first half are terrible, and it's partially because of him. So honestly, the receivers are way down the list. The receivers are whatever. I mean, they're Najee Harris, though, I will say, on the when they went for the field goal on the ensuing third down play, when Ben tossed it up to him, he just lost the ball. That was a touchdown. I don't know what was going on there, but outside of that, they're just not talented. It is what it is. What are you going to do? But the receivers aren't the issue here. I mean, they are an issue, but they are not the issue. They are one of the issues. Really, the solution to this is just to blow the whole offense up and restart. That's really
well, that's where I was going to go here. We're getting a lot of traction here in the chat. A lot of this are people that are completely done with Matt Canada. We even have a comment here. I can't stand Matt Canada's offense. He needs to stay in college. I'd rather get Todd Haley or Fichtner back for reals, which is just hilarious to see from a Steeler fan, because during the two eras of those two gentlemen coaching the Steelers offense, and I think unfair maybe for Todd Haley, they were just getting blasted week after week, and the Steelers lost Todd Haley's last game as a coordinator thanks to their defense. He's wildly hated, and Fichtner certainly was not popular. But Matt Canada, who came in actually with some hype and some people getting excited about Matt Canada coming in. Alan brought up that you need to have an offensive line that's strong for his scheme. That is true. So maybe seeing him with a better offensive line could help things. Obviously, Ben is an aging quarterback. His skills have been diminished. He is handcuffed. Maybe seeing with Matt Canada with something different at quarterback, whether it be younger, whether it be somebody even with a stronger arm, maybe that would help things. Maybe health would also help things. You mentioned the receiver corps. That's just basically a group that, there have been some issues, but it's almost funny when there are issues because they just compound all the other issues. Are you so done with Matt Canada in terms of his play calling? Because even if you see his reaction in this game in the press box there, it looked like he's frustrated that the execution's not there. So it almost comes across like he really believes in these plays and they're just not working. Like when he pounded the desk and just couldn't believe it, but it doesn't sound like you're surprised these play calls aren't working where anyone's pounding a desk. So my question to you then is, have you seen enough that you would like to be done with Matt Canada in general, or would you like to see him with a better group that maybe fits his scheme and his system a little bit better and stay the course a little bit more with a mulligan given to him? Because, Keith Butler and others may be the scapegoat for this year, which may linger Matt Canada around longer. Ben likely not back. The O-line should be better next year, you'd imagine, with more experience. Are you done with Matt Canada if it's up to you, or could you see a reason to see him with a better group? Because while he's had some issues, this is just a disaster all the way around.
I would get rid of him. I mean, I'm just saying, okay. I would get rid of him because, again, I just think the play sequencing is so subpar. And here's the thing. You have to cater your scheme. Your job as the offensive coordinator is to play to your offensive strengths. The Steelers have very limited strengths offensively. I understand that.
Right.
But the things that we see work, he doesn't do. And that's the thing. He's not catering this offense to his team's weaknesses. He's not mitigating their weaknesses. That's what you have to do as an offense coordinator. You have to play to your team's strengths. He hasn't altered his plan like that. And that tells me that you are not a good offensive coordinator, because while they're bad, and he's obviously working a little bit handcuffed right now because the bad O-line, Ben's diminishing returns,
right.
The injuries to the receiver core, Najee's inexperience, even like all of this kind of compounding together, you're not seeing him pull his weight either, because he could help here. Like, this offense doesn't have to be this bad. If the play calling, if you brought in Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay to this offense and put them as the OC, this offense would be better. It would be. Like, that's the thing here. You can see there's glimmering hopes when even in the bad times that, hey, this guy can be good, or hey, this guy can actually be good. Everything's bad around them, but every now and then you see the flicker through. There's really nothing there for me to point to for Canada. What's the reason for me to be optimistic? Is it again? Look what he did at Pitt. Look what he did at Pitt in 2016. Like, is that what it is? Because I can easily point to you. Look at what he did in LSU. This is the exact same thing that happened in LSU. He didn't cater his scheme to his personnel in Baton Rouge either, and he got run out after a season there because of the same thing.
Yeah, look at
So,
Maryland. I mean, you could absolutely look at Matt Canada's overall career now and make a case the overall career of this offensive guru is overrated now. I mean, there are now countless examples, certainly recently, of offenses not nearly being as good as the hype would command with Canada. I will just read this one comment because it's the only positive comment of this entire chat somehow. I think it depends on if they are able to bring in someone like Aaron Rodgers, which I contend I still don't think is happening, even though people just will not stop talking about it. If Aaron Rodgers wants to come to Pittsburgh, fire Canada and give him whoever he wants. If not, give Canada another shot with a better suited group. So, okay, big rush, whoever you are. That is the one man in the chat that is willing to give Canada more time, barring Aaron Rodgers coming to Pittsburgh. So, again, I get the only devil's advocate stance is, yes, Matt Canada stubbornly won't make adjustments, it appears, and to cater to what is there. That if you have Matt Canada and you know that he's not going to make adjustments and he's just going to be stubborn, but you want to have success, this group is almost the worst suited for him. I mean, blocking's an issue, offensive line, aging quarterback, etc.
This discussion reminds me a lot of, the Keith Butler discussion you had when the defense didn't have as much talent as they did. And then people were like, we got to fire Butler. And then they get, Minkah Fitzpatrick in. Well,
that's the thing. I don't think it's a guarantee they're going to fire Canada because they do like to give coaches a chance. They're going to have this conversation with Canada, I'm sure, in the offseason. And I could see him convincing them because they do like to stay the course.
They do.
If they truly believe there's a legitimate excuse there might be this year.
There is. And you look at the Keith Butler situation, it's the same thing. But I do want to – here's the thing. When you looked at the defense in 2019 and 2020, for example, when they were a really good defense, a top flight of the league defense, did you look at that defense and say it's because of Keith Butler? Like, did anyone ever say this is because of Keith Butler or Mike Tomlin or whoever has their fingerprints? I think both of them have their fingerprints on this offense.
Sure, yeah.
So.
Yeah, did anyone ever say that? Like, adding Minkah, I mean, different
they had Minkah, Hayden, Hilton. All these guys, Hayward, Watt became an elite player. Sure. They had all these guys. Bud Dupree came into his own. Like, they had all of these guys, and it was a talent thing overcoming bad schematics because everyone would point out every now and then, there's a linebacker on a receiver. Then you look this year and everything is kind of creeping back up with him, right? Because you look at kind of the same issues they've had. Yeah. And while it's not the same issues as they've had in the past, it's the same things where they haven't been able to adjust to their issues. And so I think Canada overall, it's kind of the same thing where if you get more talent in here, of course he's going to look better because talent breeds with that. Sure. Good coordinators, though, are able to adjust. They're able to tweak things and kind of, what teams attack them with, they're able to tweak it to that. Canada hasn't tweaked anything this year. So if he does get a good quarterback in here, I don't know, say he gets Russell Wilson.
Whoever.
Or something, and he's the offensive coordinator. Okay, Russ struggles 1 week. The schematics are a clear part of it. Why should I trust him to change that? He hasn't changed anything this year. Yeah. So what's he going to do?
Russ would be perfect with this offensive line if he could scramble and he might be able to mask some of the issues that maybe not even Rodgers at this point could mask. So it will depend on who would be on this team next year. Juju obviously would have a contract issue. He likely not back. Najee would be in his second year. The offensive line would be a little bit more experienced. Likely another quarterback would be there. This team could look catastrophically different next year. And that could be something that either benefits or potentially makes it even worse. I mean, it could be a bridge year where Mason Rudolph starting the whole season and they don't have another plan. So would Matt Canada even want to have that resume look even worse next year? Because that's certainly a possibility that it couldn't help things. Draft O-line, and O-line. Also get rid of Matt Canada. Just had to read that from Justin Cross.
Draft the O-line. You have to.
I think you're correct there, Justin. Nick Farabaugh, Mike Asti here. Steelers post-game show. Steelers beat down to cap off Christmas weekend at the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs. They're still alive in the playoffs, obviously. They had the Monday Night Football game against the Browns and then the Ravens coming up. We'll get there in a second here. I do want to flip it to the defensive side of the football. This defense, it got healthier in recent weeks. They're still not 100% healthy, obviously, but no team is. So I'm kind of getting sick of tweets and people replying with all of that. I mean, every team is so banged up. Even some of these Steeler wins are against teams that are heavily banged up, the Titans, Ravens, etc. TJ Watt playing with cracked ribs, which is just insane that he was even out there in that situation. And they've looked good at times. They've looked really, really bad at times. Joe Hayden's return last week helped kind of propel that defense. And then you see this effort here. Is it a perfect storm of facing a Chiefs team that is hitting their stride, that does have a former MVP, that has some Hall of Famers there, and is a really good offense that can take advantage of things that, say, Tennessee could not? Or were maybe the Steelers giving you some fool's gold and they're just not really a good unit either?
I don't think they're a particularly great unit. I think they're a unit that is opportunistic. And I think that's a big part of why they did what they did last week. I mean, the Chiefs are just a terrible matchup for the Steelers, really, offensively. So the Steelers just don't have the guys to match on the outside. Like, they just don't. Not many teams do, to be fair. Not many teams can match, Hill and Kelsey. But the Steelers straight up don't. So they couldn't play any man-to-man. They couldn't blitz much. They had to play conservative because otherwise they just get beat over the top for explosive plays. And so you look at that, and it is what it is. The talent level just isn't there. It is what it is. It's years of bad drafting. It's years of not investing in positions that you should, or bad investments. Like Justin Lane has turned into a complete nothing burger, for example. That's a terrible investment of a third round pick.
Right.
There's other things. The whole situation at linebacker. I mean, it's that unit has been terrible all year. Bush falling off a cliff. Schobert really not playing well. Spillane stepping in and playing subpar as well. Like, all of that is things. I think the one thing that the defensive line, you can legitimately say, has just been decimated by injuries. I mean, they were missing Alu, Tuitt, Buggs, and Wormley today. That's just absurd. So
Chris Wormley too is an underrated loss. That's an underrated loss.
He was a big loss for them because he's their real pass rush guy outside of Hayward. And because they didn't have someone that could get Mahomes in the interior and collapse that pocket outside of Hayward, they just doubled him all game and chipped TJ. And it was what it was. And every now and then you saw Highsmith creep through because he's good enough, but everyone else just couldn't do anything. And then when TJ would come out of the games, because obviously he didn't play a ton today, he played a little bit, but not the full thing because of the cracked ribs, they would just double Highsmith. So it really was just a storm. And the Steelers overall, that defense, again, I think they're just not talented enough. I mean, the defensive backs are what they are. Minka's great. I think Edmonds is fine. He's nothing special, but he's fine. Hayden is solid, but he's getting older. Ahkello Witherspoon has been really good. I think that's a big positive.
Yeah, really good in replacement of Hayden, and then even still with Hayden back. Yeah.
I mean, Witherspoon played a really good game today.
I mean, that interception that ended up not existing was an incredible catch by him.
Yeah.
Early in this game against Kansas City, and actually that is perfect here if you want to even go on further. Any other takes on this secondary in particular? Because we have some people here in the chat, including Micah Marino, who says, "Guys, please talk about our secondary. Not sold on Edmonds, Sutton." Pretty much everyone else there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sold on Edmonds. Is who he is. He's a fine player. Right. Ideally, I think he's probably your third safety that you bring in sub packages. Certainly not a first round pick.
Are they just all out of place? Because this was a conversation a little bit in the off season of, would Sutton go to the inside or who would be on the outside? If Hayden misses games, what do you do there? And we saw that Witherspoon was able to fill in and do so admirably, but it kind of did put everybody else out of place. Hayden now back, but is this secondary just a unit that does not have clear defined roles, that nobody's in their proper role? They've been out of place too often. And then maybe the talent isn't there because, again, this is not Joe Hayden in 2016. This is 2021 Joe Hayden with a bunch of younger guys who maybe also are more number 2, number 3, number 4s rather than number 1s in those roles. And it just appears like a big weakness on this defense. I mean, so that's certainly against this team.
Like, I feel like look at where they attacked them today in those soft zones, and it was almost all in the middle of the field.
That's true.
That's a lot on the linebackers, not on the secondary. Sutton had a terrible game. And I think the more we've seen Cam Sutton play outside, the more it's clear it's dude as a slot corner. Yeah. And he's good at what he does. He's a great slot corner. He's a great dime back that they had. He was great in his previous role to this year. And I think that's where he needs to stick because they're still rotating him outside with Hayden and Witherspoon. They've now employed a rotation. I think they should scrap that. Just scrap the rotation for the final 2 games. Make the starters Hayden and Witherspoon and put on the inside when you go into nickel You can switch between Sutton and Millette depending on what you want. If you want more of a run stopper, it's Millette. If you want a coverage guy, it's Sutton. And then when you go into dime, you bring in Sutton in the slot and you bring in Trey Norwood.
Or the torch defense they sometimes throw out there with the reverse dime, if you've noticed that.
Yes. So I think that the rules should be very easy to find. Millette's been, a great run stopper blitzer. He's a little light Mike Hilton type guy. But really, they just don't have coverage linebackers at all. The secondary is nothing special to write home about, and I think corner is a really big need. And if they wanted to this year, the first round, they could draft a cornerback. I'm just saying that could work very well for them. But
it could, and there's a lot of moves they're going to have to make, and we'll leave that conversation for another day because people are going to be screaming about quarterback if they don't bring in an Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, or whoever else. But they appear unlikely to be coming, and it doesn't fit what the Steelers normally do, and they have to maybe go get somebody else. But it's why my money is still on Mason Rudolph starting week 1 next year because they might have other needs that take them away from quarterback. Certainly if they can't draft Kenny Pickett or Howell or somebody like that, if they miss those opportunities, is it that deep that you're going to risk all the other positions of need and the future and just take a quarterback just because he happened to be a QB? Nick Farabaugh, Mike Asti here as we round things out in our Steelers postgame show. The Steelers get slapped around 36-10. They lose to the Chiefs. No surprise there, but maybe a surprise with the way this game unfolded and this final score. They were just never in this game at all. The Steelers now will take on the Cleveland Browns in the Monday Night Football, so they get another day to let this simmer as the Chiefs win division. They look like potentially number 1 seed yet again, and they are in the driver's seat. The Steelers are barely getting in the car in terms of getting in the playoffs right now. They're basically running the car down on the freeway to try to somehow crawl in there. We will see. The Steelers have tons of problems, though, Nick, before we get into the keys and kind of previewing that matchup against the Browns. Obviously, some of the fixes for this team have not been possible this year, and that's been clear. And honestly, even having this conversation, Nick, I'm sure it's deja vu and a broken record for you as well, since you've been with us for a while and you appear on other shows, so do I. If you're being asked the same freaking things by me that somebody asked you 7 months ago, you know this is a bad season. And that is the reality here. They've not been able to fix a lot of the problems. The offseason talk is still a talk now because things are just the same. They have not fixed things. Sometimes they can't, and sometimes they're missing opportunities with maybe some play calling, etc., to have potentially a better outcome. For these next 2 games, though, is there anything they can do, whether it be on offense or defensively, that can help get them through these next 2 games, or are they so handcuffed and they just are flat out not good enough this year, despite the landscape of the league that might benefit them, that they are just going to have to hope for the best, and fans are just going to be upset for 2 more weeks? Can anything be done, even as a Band-Aid temporarily, to say, as Tomlin puts it, manufacture more victories this season?
I mean, there's a few. I mean, hopefully you get healthy. Like Dotson coming back would help. Freiermuth.
If besides that, though, because you're facing
like
teams,
just this,
if the Steelers get healthy, their opponents are not healthy. So
outside of that, sitting Kendrick Green down is number 1. The dude's killed them all year. You have to sit him down. I think. I think otherwise, receiver wise, find a rotation in that receiver room that doesn't get Ray McCloud a ton of touches, because he doesn't deserve the volume he's getting. I think that's one of the things they can do, whether it's moving Claypool in there more, maybe Anthony Miller gets a shot.
How does Deontay Johnson not get more opportunities? Like, a man always makes plays. He had 2 targets with no catches in this game. He did drop a bad one, but why do they hate him? I feel like it's something it's like he can't get more opportunities on this team. He's still the 4th receiver despite all the injuries.
Yeah, Washington should get more. Like, he should get more. Like, there's so many different things you should do here that should be able to mitigate that.
Ooh, 8 targets from McLeod. Lord.
I know. Like, way too much. I mean, the second right over the last, this is a starting set, over the last 4 weeks, he has the second most targets on the team, only behind Deontay Johnson. So that's the type of volume we're getting from McLeod. He doesn't need that volume. It's cool to keep him in there every now and then. I'm not saying he should be completely phased out, but get someone out here, see what Anthony Miller's got. See, he was a guy that was a high pedigree guy, a 2nd round draft pick. Like, See what he has. See what he has out there. So maybe that's something you could do.
Yeah.
I think also defensively, man, when we talked about those DB rotations, you should really put those guys in defined roles. Start Witherspoon, get Sutton in the slot on those passing downs, make Norwood the full-time linebacker. Like, that's huge. That's stuff that can actually settle them in, make them play fast, do different things. I think also just looking at the linebacker rotation, I think you need to get some stability in that linebacker room that says, okay, these are the guys we want, and this is who has to play. I think, honestly, I hate to say it, I think their best two options are Schobert and Bush. Like, that's legit.
That's
right
the thing.
now.
I don't know what else they would do.
Spillane was terrible today. He made a few fine tackles, but he was really bad in coverage. He did nothing great. The missed tackle was really bad. And you're not trusting Marcus Allen in UG3. So just, Bush at least offers speed. Before he went on the COVID list this week, he actually had a pretty solid game against the Titans. So maybe you can get something there. Again, there's just not a ton you can do with the team. And I'm not even going to throw out things that are drastic because they're not going to do it, Right. Like, I'm not going to say, wow, they should fire Matt Canada right now. Like,
yeah, that's not going to happen.
Like, it's not going to happen. So why would I even throw that out there? I don't even know. Maybe there needs to be something in the the prep planning that changes behind the scenes. We don't know all the minutiae of that.
They're not going to fire Matt Canada. The only thing I wonder is if Tomlin would get desperate enough to at least force a meeting and maybe incorporate some more Ben plays. Let Ben call a few more. I've been getting asked that for weeks now. Even fans that are realistic, they know they're not going to fire Matt Canada in the middle of the season. That's not what the Steelers do. Other franchises have done it. It's worked out for them. The Steelers are just not going to do it. They're too classy. It's not going to happen. So since they're not going to do that, people have been asking for a long time, if you're telling me that the best offense is when Ben scraps it together in the dirt, and you're not going to do that the whole game. Usually that's when they have to come back against the Chargers and Vikings. But can you see more of that even earlier in games so they're not trailing by so much early? Try a little bit more early. Well, is there any hope to that happening, maybe?
Like no huddle, adding more no huddle, especially in the first half, I think is a fine adjustment as well.
Okay, there you go.
I would attack the outside more, like throw those deep balls, because Claypool deserves more volume right now. Like Chase Claypool, for the knucklehead stuff he's done this year, you see how talented that guy is. You should be getting him the ball more.
Which is why it's even more frustrating. But
yes. And they'll see a lot of two-man coverage too, so they can run those crossers, those shallow drags, the stuff that creates traffic, bunch sets. Like, get into these things. You don't, because it seems like bunch sets in particular have gone completely out the window in this offense ever since Juju Smith-Schuster left. And so why does he have to change the thing so much? You can just use speed and quickness and instead of raw physicality. Like, there are things you can do in that arena. So I think the Steelers have things they can't do. Again, they're stuck with what they have. I mean, they're really there's not drastic things, but and the thing is, you have to figure out something to crack these slow starts. This is ridiculous. I mean, 5 games without a first half touchdown. And that right there, that falls at the feet of Mike Tomlin. No one else.
Every game, it feels like, except for the Titan game. Pretty much every other game. And it doesn't matter who they're playing. They're playing great teams. They're playing good teams. They're playing mediocre teams. They're playing bad teams, no matter who it's been all year for about 2 or 3 months now. And it wasn't even this way early on in the year, but it's been this way a lot the second half of the year. Just really, really slow starts. I don't know if it's too conservative play calling early, if they're scared to let it loose. At this point, if I'm the Steelers, maybe they did try the flea flicker early, which was try to let it loose, but you got to do it smart. You got to set things up properly. It's just crazy. It really is. I mean, I got to be some Vegas prop bets when they're going to get their first.
It's a phenomenon that makes really no sense. No other team does this.
Yeah.
And so you have, and it has not, it's not like this is an issue just this year. We've seen this happen before.
There are plenty of teams too with less talent than the Steelers have. I mean, the Steelers have their issues. They're not built really soundly to win a championship by any means, and they have their issues. But again, this is why I think we get asked this by people out of market on their programs. The Steelers have too much on paper, and they do have too much talent to be this just abysmal offensively for so long, for so often. insane. I mean, there are teams that are putting up more points that would love to have had the Steelers roster prior to the year. And even you look at some of these teams offensively that are getting made fun of on the national shows with the Cowboys struggle and what they're doing. Way better than the Steelers offensive output. I mean, they're getting made fun of and they're just destroying the Steelers offensive output. So it does not make sense. That Browns game coming up Monday Night Football, obviously it's a must-win game for both teams who are both incredibly average teams. They both got their problems. They've had their drama this year. Unlike the Chiefs, who are a very bad matchup for Pittsburgh, it does feel like the Browns are coming at maybe the perfect time and are normally a great matchup for the Steelers. That's at home. That's Monday Night Football. It's one more day if you have to figure things out and change things up in practice. What are the keys to that matchup against the Browns, and how do you see that game unfolding?
Well, very similar to the first matchup, just keying on Chubb. I mean, you have to stop Chubb, and the Steelers' run game. If they let the rush defense completely fall off, this game's going to be ugly, a very ugly game. But they didn't in the first matchup. They got up for that one, and they played really well. And so I think if they can force the hands into Baker Mayfield, like force the game into his hands, that's where you will have your advantageous opportunities. The Browns defense is solid, so you're probably not going to score many points, so you're going to want to keep them in a low-scoring game. Maybe get a few turnovers off Baker. Baker clearly is prone to turnovers, 4 picks against the Packers on Saturday. Yeah. So force the game into his hands, take it out of Chubb's hands. You know Chubb's probably going to get something at least in there every now and then, but they really held him in check in that first matchup. So they can do this. So if you want to win this game, you got to stop Chubb, force it into Baker's hands. On offense, again, those man beating routes that I talked about, just hit them. The crossers, the drags, all that stuff. Use it because that's exactly what beats this team. And use Deontay Johnson too, because Deontay Johnson is a special talent that not many guys can cover. And again, get Claypool involved. So less Ray McLeod and more Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. And obviously, if Freiermuth is there as well, get him involved as well, because he's a guy that I think they really missed as a chain mover today. So if he could get involved as well, get him involved. It's basic stuff. You just have to stop the run and put it into the Mayfield's hands. And on offense, you just have to attack that man coverage stuff and get man beaters. Steelers have plenty of man beaters. We saw them throughout the game. They just don't use them a lot.
Yeah, and honestly, it really is basic stuff, Nick. I mean, you shouldn't have to be Nick Farabaugh to figure that out. Honestly, the Browns' game plan is pretty easy to scheme against, and the Steelers' strengths are pretty clear. Their weaknesses are even clearer. So I think the only thing I'm sure they're going to do that you're saying is use Deontay Johnson a lot because he is leading them in targets every one of these games, 9 targets in this one. They're going to try to keep using him in every one of these games, but you do need to have less Ray McLeod, maybe more Chase Claypool. Try to administer the run early in the game, especially if you're going to try a trick play that involves the team at least biting on the run a little bit. And force into Baker's hand, because I will tell you, even how Ben's been playing this year, if it got to be Ben beat you or Baker beat you, I still would bet on Ben Roethlisberger. Baker Mayfield's had his issues. If you force it into his hands, you will have a chance. It is the perfect matchup coming up, but hey, there's reason to be pessimistic here. As most of this chat is here. I don't even see them beating the Browns. How could you say they're going to beat the Browns? Well, watch the Browns play, by the way, guys.
They already beat the Browns. That's how I can say they would beat the Browns.
That's what I'm saying. They beat the Browns and just watch the Browns play on Christmas Day. The Browns are not in any way impressive, even though the Steelers certainly have looked their worst often this year and really looked bad in this game. Nick, thanks for the time. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend and maybe watch some better football prior to the next time we talk on one of these, because what a way that was to close off this holiday weekend. And Santa did not bring good cheer to Steeler fans. Any of those Steeler fans, good boys and girls, they got to get in that list for next year, because this was a lump of coal in a Steeler fan stockings here to end this weekend. That'll do it for this edition of the postgame show. Steelers lose to the Chiefs 36-10. They fight for their playoff lives against the Browns. Monday Night Football. So rivalry, a big game, national TV. We'll be there in attendance against 2 average teams. But hey, the Steelers will have a chance in this one. But God, they got to look different than they did against the Chiefs, because that output is going to lose to pretty much everyone.